Over the last 3 weeks, we have lifted up the value of a life of generosity. 3 or 4 Sundays ago, I would say, we remembered how the generous contributions of God's people out in the wilderness matched with the ability of those who had skill in building. The people built the tabernacle, which was a dwelling place for God among them. The following Sunday, we heard the story where Jesus fed a very large crowd of people. We considered the ways that it may not have been Wonder Bread that Jesus created that day, but it may have been an act of generosity, a witness of sharing that allowed people to see Jesus share, which then shifted a scarcity mindset so that the people could recognize the abundance that was among them. Last week, Pastor Ryan shared with us the importance of prayer and discernment as we seek to understand the things that are worth investing our time, our resources, and our energy. Today, Bruce has shared with us Paul's appeal to a full-hearted and sincere form of generosity. But first, before we get into that, there's one other thing that we have done over the weeks of this series. We've noted some personal stories of learning to become generous. So I've shared a bit of my story through an email at the beginning of this time, but I'd like to share a bit more with you here and now. For anyone who's been paying attention during the 8+ years that I've been here, you probably are not surprised that I've not always enjoyed talking to you about money. Is that a shock to anyone? In fact, there was one Sunday early in the pandemic where that dislike was on full display. I went back and I watched it this week, and I cringed. And I'm not telling you what week it was because I don't want you to go watch it and cringe. To set the scene, it was a Sunday morning. There were only about 8 of us in the building in those days. We were in this magnificent space, 3 pastors and a tech team. Pastor Sherry offered the sermon. After the message, I shared some prayers. We had a couple of seats down here, and we had a smaller table up front. I looked into a small camera in front of me. My body physically closed in, and I said, "These are not the things I like to talk about. And I know I'm not supposed to say that these are not the things that I like to talk about." And then I said, "But the church is experiencing some financial struggles right now." Now, to be clear, that was not the official report of the Finance Committee, nor did anyone ask me to sound that dire alarm that day. In fact, that message didn't have a thing to do with church finances. It had everything to do with my own anxiety about standing before you and talking about money. The other funny part of this, and I wasn't going to say this, is that because we had 2 chairs sitting right there, Pastor Sherry was on the screen the entire time and had to keep a straight face while I was... She was usually a good sport, but she wasn't very happy with me that day. As I try to think back to what was happening in that moment, part of my resistance probably had to do with that deeply held American ideal that money is an individual's own business and no one else's to talk about. But ultimately, what I didn't understand at that point, or at many points along the way, is that money is about relationships. In fact, that's what Paul teaches us in our passage today, is that money is about relationships. Now, Paul is writing to the church in Corinth. They had some problems, but the people there had some financial means. And they had committed to supporting a church that was struggling, the church that was in Jerusalem. It was a time of persecution and suffering that they were going through. They had committed to giving some funds, but time was rolling on, and the gift had not been given yet. Encouraging the people to make good on that commitment, Paul reminded them of all the relationships that are impacted by the ways that we think about and handle money. Just want to move through these kind of quickly. But one of those relationships is the one that we have towards things and wealth itself. When we see our lives as a gift where God is the one who provides for our needs, God sustains our lives, then we can find that healthy balance where we have enough. Not too little, that's not God's desire, and not too much, which is also not God's desire. When we are content with enough, there is an abundance left over to contribute to the well-being of others, to the well-being of all. And there's another relationship that Paul lifts up here that has something to do with money. What we have from God is not only about our own provision and our own comfort. That's a part of it, of course. But money is a means by which we can meaningfully care for others. To live generously is to love our neighbor well. As I've already suggested, how we think about money is about our trust in God who provides for all of our needs. When we are generous, we proclaim through our actions that we have put our trust in God's goodness to sustain us all the days of this life. Through generosity, we honor who God is as our sustainer, and we glorify the God who takes care of us. And one other relationship that is tied up with money here is the relationship that we have with ourselves. I love the tone of Paul's comments here, and as Bruce has shared with us. He's not a prosperity preacher. He's not one who twists the arm promising great wealth if you'll only write one more zero at the end of that check. He resists that kind of manipulation. And instead, he invites the Corinthians to do some spiritual work. He asks them to slow down, to listen, and pay attention to what is in their heart. Paul encourages the Corinthians to contribute to the ministries of the church with whatever they can give from a place of a joyful heart. Paul resists manipulation, but that isn't to say he's not straightforward about the value of generosity. The more joy-filled the heart, and the more generous the giver, the more abundant the blessings, and the richer the relationships that emerge with things, with others, with the self, and with God. If I might return to my story for a moment, I'd like to believe that I'm in a bit healthier place today than I was on that Sunday at the start of the pandemic, when I didn't even feel like I wanted to be in my own body talking to you all. In large part, I credit that growth to this congregation. Your continual witness of joy-filled generosity is contagious. And as it's worked on me, I found it to be freeing. Because of you, like that crowd that met with Jesus that was hungry, by the end of the story, they were less bound by their scarcity. You all are helping me get to that place. And I find joy in giving that I did not even find in talking to you all about 3 years ago. So thank you for that. In a few minutes, you'll be invited to come to a moment of commitment as we bring our 2024 estimate of giving cards forward. But before we come to that moment, that time, I'd like to echo the apostles' words just one more time. Commit to give what seems right in your heart, knowing that when the heart guides our actions toward generosity, our relationships will grow deeper, That's one of our missional priorities this year. Our relationship with God will grow deeper. Our relationship with others can grow deeper. Our relationship and a healthy relationship with the things of this life, the material things that sustain us, will grow richer. And even the relationship we have with ourselves will benefit. May it be so. Amen.